Hello, my name is Nishat Noor and welcome to Millennium Headlines. This week's top headlines are President Barack Obama's weekly address. America is a place where hard work should be rewarded. Malala Yousafzai and Kailash Satyarthi are awarded Nobel Peace Prize. West Africans make plea for a long list of Ebola needs. Hong Kong protests thin as two sides agree to talk. Dallas Ebola patient was initially sent home despite high fever, records show. Talks with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi was fruitful, says Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Now the details to this week's top headlines. In this week's address, the President makes the case for why it's past time to raise the minimum wage. Increasing the national minimum wage to $10.10 an hour would benefit 28 million Americans and make our economy stronger.
Hi, everybody. For the first time in more than 6 years, the unemployment rate is below 6%. Over the past 4.5 years, our businesses have created more than 10 million new jobs. That's the longest uninterrupted stretch of private sector job creation in our history. But while our businesses are creating jobs at the fastest pace since the 90s, the typical family hasn't seen a raise since the 90s also. Folks are feeling as squeezed as ever. That's why I'm going to keep pushing policies that will create more jobs faster and raise wages faster. Policies like rebuilding our infrastructure, making sure women are paid fairly, and making it easier for young people to pay off their student loans. But one of the simplest and fastest ways to start helping folks get ahead is by raising the minimum wage. Ask yourself, could you live on $14,500 a year? That's what someone working full-time on the minimum wage makes. If they're raising kids, that's below the poverty line, and that's not right. A hard day's work deserves a fair day's pay. Right now, a worker on the federal minimum wage earns $7.25 an hour. It's time to raise that to $10.10 an hour. Raising the federal minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, or $10.10, would benefit 28 million American workers. 28 million. And these aren't just high schoolers on their first job. The average worker who would benefit is 35 years old. Most low-wage workers are women, and that extra money would help them pay the bills and provide for their families. It also means they'll have more money to spend at local businesses, which grows the economy for everyone. But Congress hasn't voted to raise the minimum wage in 7 years. 7 years. And when it got a vote earlier this year, Republicans flat out voted no. That's why since the first time I asked Congress to give America a raise, 13 states, 21 cities, and the District of Columbia have gone around Congress to raise their workers' wages. 5 more states have minimum wage initiatives on the ballot next month. More companies are choosing to raise their workers' wages. A recent survey showed that a majority of small business owners support a gradual increase to $10.10 an hour too. And I've done what I can on my own by requiring federal contractors to pay their workers at least $10.10 an hour. On Friday, a coalition of citizens, including business leaders, working moms, labor unions, and more than 65 mayors, told Republicans in Congress to stop blocking a raise for millions of hardworking Americans. Because we believe that in America, nobody who works full-time should ever have to raise a family in poverty. And I'm going to keep up this fight until we win, because America deserves a raise right now. And America should forever be a place where your hard work is rewarded. Thanks, and have a great day.
Reaching across gulfs of age, gender, faith, nationality, and even international celebrity, the Norwegian Nobel Peace Committee awarded the 2014 Peace Prize on Friday to Malala Yousafzai of Pakistan and Kailash Satyarthi of India. The award joins a teenage Pakistani known around the world with an Indian veteran of campaigns to end child labor and free children from trafficking.
The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided that the Nobel Peace Prize for 2014 is to be awarded to Kailash Satyarthi and Malala Yousafzai for their struggle against suppression of young people and children's right to education.
Malala Yousafzai is an education campaigner in Pakistan who was shot in the head by a Taliban gunman 2 years ago. The Nobel Committee said she's become a leading spokesperson for girls' rights to education. The committee said that she's shown that young people can contribute to improving their own situations, and she's done so under the most dangerous circumstances.
Thousands of people have been killed by the terrorists, and millions have been injured. I'm just one of them.
The 17-year-old is the youngest ever winner of the prize and the first Nobel laureate born in Pakistan. Kailash Satyarthi gave up his career as an electrical engineer over 3 decades ago to start the Save the Childhood movement. According to the Nobel Committee, the nonprofit organization is leading the movement to eliminate child trafficking and child labor in India.
We may have different opinions, different approaches, but one thing was very common, and that is optimism. That's hope. That's determination to defeat child labor.
The committee said Mr. Satyarthi has maintained Gandhi's tradition of peaceful protests and demonstrations. The 5-member committee picked the winner out of a record 278 nominations that included Pope Francis and former U.S. intelligence contractor Edward Snowden. The prize comes with a $1.1 million cash award and is considered one of the most prestigious honors in the world. Previous winners of the Nobel Peace Prize include Barack Obama, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, and the European Union.
The presidents of the 3 West African countries most affected by Ebola implored world leaders on Thursday to increase their support to fight the disease, saying that while the international response has expanded, it had been slow to be felt on the ground.
This is going to be a long, hard fight.
With thousands now infected, millions of dollars are being pledged to develop treatment options for Ebola.
The enemy here is a virus.
Here's 3 avenues that have potential, but are a long way from being viable treatment. First, there's ZMapp, one of a few experimental drugs in the pipeline. It's shown the most promise.
Probably by the end of this year, we will have enough information to move on to a larger clinical trial.
It's made using tobacco plants, and there are only a few facilities like this one at Icon Genetics in Germany with the capacity.
Investigators and company officials are trying to develop an alternative way of producing it that would allow us to have many, many more doses much more quickly.
Either way, supplies are expected to be very limited. At most, a few thousand treatments by early next year.
In terms of plasma, there's also a lot of movement, a lot of interest.
Another treatment option is using the blood of people who have recovered from Ebola.
I'm a lucky man to free from this Ebola.
Survivors' blood plasma contains tiny antibodies that attack the virus and fight off an Ebola infection. The idea is that a blood transfusion could get those antibodies inside sick patients. Will it work? The WHO has said it's plausible, but some virologists doubt it does anything. The third option is a vaccine. These are trials currently underway in the UK using healthy volunteers. The vaccine itself is made using an unrelated virus from a chimpanzee as a spine that is then combined with small bits of the Ebola virus. There's no promise yet that it will even work, and if it did, it would only help people who aren't currently infected.
If everything goes well again, we might be able to start to use some of these vaccines at the very beginning of next year.
Of all these options, none are expected to be treating large numbers of patients until at least 2015.
Crowds of protesters who filled Hong Kong streets with demands for more democracy thinned dramatically Tuesday after student leaders and the government agreed to hold talks in the increasingly frustrated city.
You know, the Chinese government, they don't want us to have the democracy because Hong Kong may be a sample for the rest of the city to follow. Maybe they don't want the government to. They don't want their people to stand against the government. So they have been suppressing our movement. They don't want us to be a good sample for them. If we succeed, the other city may think we have a chance to.
The government never respond to the citizens' thoughts, so we want to support the movement. So until the government have a real response to us.
Medical records unveiled Friday of the Liberian man who died of the Ebola virus have raised new questions about the treatment he received when he first came to a Dallas emergency room.
Ebola patient diagnosed in the U.S. has died in Dallas after more than a week of hospitalization. 42-year-old Thomas Eric Duncan had been kept in isolation. He went from serious to critical condition over the weekend. Duncan carried the virus with him from his home in Liberia, despite not showing signs when he left for the U.S. The case prompted fear in Dallas, though health officials said none of the nearly 50 people Duncan came in contact with have developed symptoms. More than 3,400 people have died from Ebola worldwide as the virus continues to ravage West Africa, with the latest case in Spain where a nurse was infected, becoming the first person to contract the virus outside of Africa during the current outbreak. Meanwhile, President Obama said the U.S. would ramp up efforts to screen Ebola-stricken travelers at airports in the U.S. and West Africa.
Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina said talks on several issues like militancy, border agreement, and trade with her Indian counterpart Narendra Modi in New York were fruitful.
বিসমিল্লাহিররহমানিররহিম। সাংবাদিক ভাই বোনেরা সেখানে যাই, কাজে জাতিসংঘে আমরা সরকার গঠন করার পরে প্রথম আমি গেলাম। তিনি আরো বলেন যে সন্ত্রাসের বিরুদ্ধে এই একক লড়াই চালাতে গিয়ে আমার জীবনে যে ঝুঁকির মধ্যে পড়েছে সে বিষয়ে তিনি অবগত আছেন। এই সময় আমাদের মধ্যে বিভিন্ন স্বার্থ সংশ্লিষ্ট বিষয় নিয়ে আলোচনা হয়, বিশেষ করে স্থল সীমানা চুক্তি 2074 অনুসমর্থন এবং তিস্তা নদী বন্টন চুক্তি সংক্রান্ত বিষয়গুলো দ্রুত নিষ্পত্তির বিষয়টি আমি তুলে ধরি এবং ভারতের প্রধানমন্ত্রী জানান যে তার সরকার এই বিষয়গুলি দ্রুত সমাধানের লক্ষ্যে সক্রিয়ভাবে ও নিষ্ঠার সাথে কাজ করে যাচ্ছে। বন্ধু বিনিময় আপনারা জানেন যে এটা নিয়ে ইতিমধ্যে আমাদের আলাপ আলোচনা ভারতের সঙ্গে কিন্তু চলছে। আমাদের স্বরাষ্ট্রমন্ত্রী এবং স্বরাষ্ট্র সচিব সহ এরা এবং ভারতের কাউন্টার পার্ট তাদের সঙ্গে কিন্তু বৈঠক আমাদের চলছে এবং এ ব্যাপারে কিন্তু একটা সমঝোতা এবং চুক্তি এটা অনেক দূর অগ্রগতি লাভ করেছে। তারপরেও আমরা কিন্তু যখন যেটা সম্ভব হচ্ছে আমরা কিন্তু আমাদের যারা অপরাধী তাদের ফেরত আনা এবং কাজ করা এটা আমরা অনেক দূর এগিয়ে নিয়ে যাচ্ছি। কাজে এটা একটা চলমান প্রক্রিয়া, এটা চলছে।
Thank you for watching Millennium Headlines, and we'll see you next week.